August.
Bernie.
Nice to meet you. How are you?
Phil, Pettipies.
Phil,
Nice to meet you.
thank you.
Andy Flack.
Andy, thanks for being here. Hi.
Meredith.
Alright, so you can see the accessibility here.
Yeah, it's not good. You have to lift up.
Hi. Okay, well, good to
Nice
to meet you. Cool. So, where's a good place to huddle?
I didn't want to go inside. We'll hang around the table here if you like.
That looks good. Let's do that.
Alright.
Yeah, that's terrific. Go
Ben, nice to meet you. Phil.
Phil, good to meet you.
Introduce themselves too.
This is a more urban setting than Dover was.
Yeah.
Working on it. How we can help support what you're about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, so we're going to get a sit down here with Jill Stein, who's a Green Party candidate for president. She is a doctor. She is a activist against coal and other really big things for the environment. So,
Dr. Stein, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jill Stein. She's seeking the nomination of the Green Party's candidate for U.S. president, and she's been campaigning on the new Green Deal plan to end unemployment by investing in green jobs, stopping climate change, establishing health care as a human right, and ending the oil wars, among other things. Dr. Stein, while not claiming to be an Occupy candidate, is one of the very few politicians who have openly embraced the Occupy movement. She's just come from Occupy Congress and Occupy Dover, and after visiting with us this afternoon, she's heading back down to D.C. to Occupy the courts on January 20th.
Yep.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jill Stein.
thanks for coming out.
Thank you for coming here.
Thank you, and thank you all for doing what you're doing and completely changing the political landscape and, you know, showing that another world is possible. That so many of us have been working for that world for years, for decades, and something really magical is happening around the Occupy that has just broken the sound barrier, has changed what people are thinking about and talking about, and all of a sudden we've discovered that there are so many of us that we actually are the 99%, that we really do have not only the moral authority, we also have actually majority opinion behind us. And I think what you're about, you know, is, fundamentally what I and so many of us have been working on, that is to take our democracy, the promise of our democracy back. We've never had a perfect democracy, but it's been better than what we've got right now. And there's no reason why we cannot, at this point in time, this historic moment, actually begin to reclaim that promise of democracy and the peaceful, just, green future that actually is possible. They would like us to think it's not possible, that we have to choose between an economy and an environment, that we have to choose between a healthcare system or an education system. And in fact, it's really not. They would like us to think that there's no money, but in fact they mean there's no money for us, for the 99%. There's plenty of money for wars and Wall Street bailouts and for tax breaks for the wealthy. But, you know, actually we can just redirect some of that money to the things that we need, like a healthcare as a human right and a single-payer Medicare for all system that actually saves us money. It not only provides health care for everyone, comprehensive health care, restores consumer choice so that it's you and your doctor making decisions and not an insurance bureaucrat who's looking for the bottom line to squeeze as much profit out of the system and out of your care as possible. A single-payer system also saves a lot of money because it stabilizes medical inflation. And if you look at what the real drivers are of our debt, this great debt crisis that they concocted and inflicted on us, one of the biggest drivers is the extraordinary and growing cost of health care, which is really not about the aging demographic. It's really about this skyrocketing price of profiteering health care. So we've got a win-win on health care. They're just trying to keep it off the table. And our dear president, you know, who supported it so much until he got in office and he just wanted that Democratic majority, suddenly we had that Democratic majority and it was taken off the table, like so many other things. We're talking about a Green New Deal for America. That's what our buttons are about, and maybe we can pass some of those around. So, you know, we've got an employment crisis and an economic crisis at the same time that we have a climate crisis and a health crisis. Well, guess what? We can fix them all in one fell swoop. Looking back in our history, what got us out of, the worst economic crisis we've ever been in, and that was a New Deal. So let's use that New Deal. The small change isn't going to get us out of this really ingrained, entrenched recession that we're in. And just going back to the economy that we had, an exploitive economy that exploits people and labor and the environment, is not going to do it for us. We need to transition. At the same time that we recover, we want to transition to a sustainable and just economy for the long haul. So we would use this recovery process to also be that transition to a sustainable and just economy at the same time that we basically solve the climate crisis by transitioning to a green energy economy. So specifically, we would have a nationally funded program which is locally run, locally determined, and administered. So it's not some great Politburo, Stalinist bureaucracy. We're talking about empowering our communities and creating jobs that are locally owned, locally run, both private sector as well as public jobs. So instead of going to the unemployment office, you go to the employment office and you get a job that pays good living wages and that also makes your community stronger and healthier and more sustainable. So we're looking at creating jobs that make us sustainable economically, socially, as well as environmentally. So we're talking about teachers, child care workers, elder care workers, after school program professionals, as well as jobs in the so-called green sectors, that is clean manufacturing, local sustainable agriculture, public transportation, and green energy that makes wars for oil obsolete.
Right.
So this is a peace saver as well as a money saver. It also turns out it's a health saver because by creating public and active forms of transportation, we make it possible to bike to work and to walk to school and to get healthy like Copenhagen, where 40% of people actually bike to get to work. Wouldn't that be novel if you didn't have to own a car and get in your car and fight the traffic to get to where you need to go? We need a much more diverse and sustainable transportation system. And the cool thing is that that also enables us to be healthy at the same time, likewise having a local and healthy food system so that we don't have communities that are basically food deserts, so that you don't have to have very deep pockets in order to go to Whole Foods and buy healthy, local, delicious, organically grown food. That should be something that's affordable and available to us all, and that helps strengthen our local economy at the same time it makes us healthier. And just a quick case in point, when Cuba's oil pipeline went down and they had to resort to active transportation and sort of healthy, local, organic food, largely plant-based, can you imagine what happened to their health? They had no money to spend on health, and they're in a complete crisis, an economic crisis. You would think their health would have gone down the tubes, but simply because their food system and their transportation system became sustainable, their death rate from diabetes went down 50%, death rate from heart disease went down 35%, and same for strokes and all-cause mortality. We're spending $1 trillion a year on a healthcare system that's making us go broke and is certainly not making us healthy. So the point here is that by going green for our economy, we not only solve the jobs problem and the environmental problem, we also create basically a real infrastructure for health, and we can help solve this health problem. We have a sick care system where we make people sick, and then we spend a lot of money trying to patch things up and keep you going while you're chronically ill. And we're looking at all these chronic diseases now in our kids that used to be diseases of adults, and now it's really an epidemic among all of us. And we can actually fix that for nothing. It costs $0 in Cuba. We're spending $1 trillion a year and not moving forward, really only moving backward. So there are many win-win solutions here. The Green New Deal is one of them. As I mentioned, the healthcare as a human right is a second. A third is stopping the war, obviously, the war in Afghanistan now, and actually bringing the troops home not only from Afghanistan, but also from Iraq, where we continue to have private security contractors as well. We are looking at expanding wars that are drone wars now, which are also extremely dangerous and getting us into trouble. We've opened up a new front in the war for oil in Central Africa now that we know that there are major oil reserves there as well. So we need a foreign policy that's based on international law and human rights, and not fundamentally on militarism. So we can then bring the troops home, cut the size of the military budget, and actually have the additional funding to pay for these programs that we badly need. So there's the war and students. We need to move into the 21st century with our education system and consider a college degree like what a high school degree used to be in the 20th century, so that we should have tuition-free college education for our students and really be creating, that productive citizenry, the engaged citizenry, as well as the real economic engine and the vision of a new economy. So we want to not only make college education free at our public institutions, but also to forgive student debt, because we did it for the banks, we forgave their debt. How about we forgive it for the students who didn't cause it to start with? So we can be forgiving student debt and use that as another way to jumpstart our economic recovery as well. So those are some of the key critical pieces of our program. I'd like to just open it up to your thoughts. I'll just add one more thought, which is that we've been told for years, decades, to just be quiet, vote for the lesser evil, and things will get better. But we've had now at least 10 years experience with that lesser evil, and how's that working out for you? I think what we found is that silence is not an effective political strategy. And the politics of fear has basically delivered everything we were afraid of. The expanding war, the collapsing economy, the warming climate, all those things we were so worried about with the Republican, we've gotten anyhow with another corporate and Wall Street sponsored political party. So, it's clear that it's really time for us to stand up and reclaim our voice. Because in a silence, what runs our democracy is just, the politics of Wall Street and big money. That if we silence ourselves, there is no public interest voice. And democracy needs a compass. That compass is our values, and those values need our voice. So this is a perfect storm. Democracy and justice are breaking out all around us. You are a big part of that here at the Occupy site. We saw that in Wisconsin with the incredible uprisings and 150,000 people in the streets. We're seeing that in the democracy revolutions in the Middle East. That democracy and justice are breaking out all around us. We are a part of that. Our campaign is a way to bring that voice and that vision into the election so that we do not surrender. We don't simply roll over and surrender this presidential election to the corporate-sponsored political parties, because to vote for either of them is to give a mandate for 4 more years of Wall Street rule. And we know what that means. It means goodbye to Medicare and Social Security. It was just announced last night by the President's Job Council what their goals are going to be going forward and into this next election and into the next term. Their goals are basically deregulate, cut taxes for corporations, and let's see, what's the third one? Something along those lines that I don't recall, but that's essentially the Republican agenda. That's the same thing that the Republican Party has declared, is their goals. Oh, and the third one was to deregulate energy and to use domestic energy. And you know what that means, that means more offshore drilling, it means selling off our national parks and so on. This is a plunge into more of the crisis we've been seeing. So, in my view, we got 2 sinking ships. You can argue maybe there's a little difference. Maybe one is going down faster than the other. Some people say that the Republican ship is sinking us faster than the Democratic ship. It's not going down quite so quickly. But is the answer to a sinking ship another one that's also sinking, just a little bit less quickly? Probably not. When you're on a sinking ship, you want to get into a lifeboat. And once you get into a lifeboat, you can start to move forward and get where you need to go. And to my mind, that's what we can accomplish without a doubt in this election. Whether we are 2% of the vote or 52% of the vote, it is a win. It's a win by reclaiming our democracy, reclaiming our voice, beginning to organize so that we can grow, so that we can push forward those kinds of solutions that have massive public support, but which are constantly taken off the table by the Wall Street parties. So it's a win-win no matter how you cut it, the minute we began to stand up and reclaim our democracy and go forward towards that peaceful, just, green future, which actually is within our reach right now. So thank you all so much for what you're doing to really raise the bar and to inspire higher. I think that's what all of you are doing. That's what we're all doing for each other, and our campaign hopes to be the vehicle to bring that into the broader public dialogue in this presidential election. So carry on. Thank you so much. And let me just open up for comments, discussion. Yeah.
Your program for healthcare involves expanding Medicare to the general population.
That's right.
Have you run the numbers on what savings that would be to our government and
Yes.
our overall healthcare costs by cutting the insurance companies out of the deal?
Yeah, exactly. And basically it's about 30% of the healthcare dollar now, which is spent on the massive health insurance bureaucracy. And I know as a medical provider, so much time and energy and institutional resources go into keeping track of what insurance policy do you have, what are their rules, which medications do they pay for, what doses, what size pill can you get. I mean, there's so much energy that's put into tracking minutia in our current healthcare insurance system. So a Medicare for All system reduces that overhead massively. So instead of spending 30% of your dollar, it's more like 2% or maybe 3% of the dollar. It translates, according to Physicians for National Health Plan, which is a group that follows this, it's about $400 billion in savings right there. That money then can be used to basically expand coverage so that everyone is covered comprehensively, including chronic care as well as acute care and mental health and dental and all those things that get cut off. And even when you have an insurance policy these days, you wind up paying, so much for your premium or for your copay that it becomes even unaffordable for people who have plans. So that's the first benefit. But then there's another benefit that kicks in over a course of years, which is that right now we have skyrocketing healthcare inflation. But under a Medicare for All system, that inflation gets markedly leveled, so that we begin to save, actually it's thought to be trillions of dollars over the course of a decade. So that means a massive amount of savings that we can put back into creating jobs, providing education as a human right for our college students and so on. So it's really a massive windfall for us. Thank you for asking.
Plus the executive salaries, right?
There you go. And the advertising and all that. It's a win-win all around. Yes.
What would be, if elected president, what would you do towards limiting large corporate influence, such as like Monsanto and the Koch brothers and things like that?
Great questions, and I think there are many things we can do. One of those things is happening tomorrow at the steps of the Supreme Court, where we are supporting the so-called move to amend, which is to actually amend the Constitution so that corporations are not given constitutional rights, the rights of personhood, the rights of free speech, which is then equated with money so that they can then buy out our election system, and we cannot create laws to regulate it. We cannot, we often cannot regulate Monsanto, or we can't regulate our crops or the use of pesticides in our communities. We cannot create protections for public health and for the environment because the rights of personhood, because it would be discriminating against corporations who are polluting us or killing us or sending our jobs overseas. It's crazy that the Constitution has been misinterpreted the way that it has to accord these rights to corporations. So changing the Constitution is one thing, but there are many things we can do at the same time. So, for example, we can get money out of politics. We can require that the public airwaves are accessible to qualified candidates as a public service, so that the big media corporations have to provide free airtime as a public service. So that way, you know what happens the minute you do that? The minute you do that, you don't need to have billion-dollar campaigns. And even if you're raising $1 billion, it doesn't do you much good, because everybody, you know, has a level playing field to be heard. So those are just, you know, some of the things. Another thing that, you know, if we're electing public interest candidates, like myself, if I was in the White House, I would be house cleaning, you know, as the first thing that I do. Right now, the White House is populated by Wall Street. If you're looking at, you know, Larry Summers, who's no longer there, or Tim Geithner, who oversaw the New York Fed while all that waste, fraud, and abuse was going on, you know, and he just managed to look the other way. So we would not have a national treasurer, you know, Secretary of the Treasury, who was partly responsible for crashing the economy. The head of the jobs program right now is Jeffrey Immelt, you know, of GE, who is probably the king of offshoring jobs and closing factories. You know, what a statement that is about the White House priorities for job creation. It's all about, you know, creating and preserving the jobs of CEOs and cutting the jobs of working America. So there's an enormous amount that we can do from the moment go to get corporations out of government and money out of politics and put people back in.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm very impressed. I'm not easily impressed.
Oh, good.
But, are you going to be able to get up on a stage with Obama and debate Obama and whoever the
Good question.
Republicans come up with?
We're certainly going to be trying, and in Massachusetts, where I've run for statewide office a couple of times, they have not managed to lock us out of the debates. And
Nice to see you up on a stage
Right.
with Obama.
to hear truth spoken to power would be really, I think, very gratifying. I was included in governor's debates in Massachusetts in 2002 and actually declared the winner by the likes of the Boston Globe and the Boston Phoenix, because these guys, you know, no harm intended, but they're really not talking about problem solving. They're just sort of blathering, and so, you know, they're at a disadvantage if they actually have to talk to a candidate who's not simply a puppet for corporate sponsors. So we'll see. We will be actually holding a People's State of the Union the day after the President's State of the Union, which is on the 24th. We'll be holding our State of the Union on the 25th and encouraging people to just invite a neighbor over or have a house party or a get-together. People you think who care about jobs, who care about where our climate is going, you know, who care about bringing the troops home or downsizing the banks, you know, all these sort of no-brainers that everybody's supporting but told, oh, you couldn't possibly do that, you know. It's only the people who want that, not the power brokers. You know, so if you want to have a gathering, here's a good excuse to have a gathering. We're going to have a live streamed Q&A also, so that people can send in questions and comments, and we'll have some time to respond to that. But we think...
And that will all be at jillstein.org, so just tune in.
Yeah.
That's where you can find it.
Yeah, do you want to pass around a sign-up?
I'll do that. Yeah, I didn't want to distract earlier on the buttons, but I'll do that now.
Great. So we'll pass around a sheet if you'd like to stay in touch. In this age of internet, you know, people often say, well, you're facing $2 billion campaigns. You know, what do you know, how dare you think that you hold a candle to the power of those, you know, of those disinformation campaigns, you know? What do little old you have to do with that? You know, well, I think we just point to what happened in Egypt and what happened in Tunisia, where they didn't have any money for public relations.
Yeah,
you sure can. Thank you. They didn't have money for a public relations campaign. They had just the power of the people who are really, you know, whose future is at stake, whose lives are at stake, whose democracy is at stake. So there's an enormous amount we can do, especially by starting with the knowledge that we win here. Alice Walker, the African-American novelist, had a great saying. She has a great saying, which to me summarizes it. The biggest way people give up have it in the first place. And this is essentially psychological warfare, where we are being goaded into thinking that we do not have the power, but we do. We are still a democracy, and we will make ourselves more of a democracy. And this campaign is the perfect storm to build that democracy, to start from where we are, make our voices heard, and build from there. Whether we are 2% or 52%, we can start reclaiming justice and start reclaiming a sustainable environment and sustainable communities and move forward in the course of this election. So thanks for making it happen.
What happened online, with
Thank
the
you.
Arab Spring and
Yes,
everything.
yes.
And I'm wondering what your position is on internet regulation
Oh,
and
yeah, right.
the Online Privacy Act
Right,
and the
right.
free speech.
Yes, no, of course, I oppose that, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and we very much need to maintain the internet, absolutely, as one of the few truly democratized forms of communications that we still have. There are thankfully some very responsible and thoughtful, ethical members of the press, like those who are here today. Thank you very much for being here. Unfortunately, they're the exception rather than the rule, and as media has been corporatized and conglomerated, it's been, the press has become the oppress, and the depress, and the repress, and we need to recreate the press. For now, we are the media, and the internet is a key part of that. Yes?
Excuse me. I'm saying for the economics,
Yeah.
for people that's going on that's homeless
Yes.
and that's anything, what's the organization that's going to help us?
Yeah.
You know what I
Exactly. Right.
I'm saying, because we doing bad right now, but what is the situation that's going to help us be better?
Great question. Because there's a big problem with homelessness,
Yes.
with more and more people losing their homes, with the programs that we used to have to
Yes.
help prevent programs,
Yes.
to get people educated so they
Yes.
have skills and can have jobs. There are solutions to all of that. And when they
Yes,
say there's no money, what they
Right.
mean is there's no money for you. There's plenty of money for war, Wall Street, and tax breaks for the wealthy. So
Yeah.
we're going to say we're going to move that money back to where it should be, preventing homelessness, preventing foreclosures, putting a moratorium on the foreclosures, and requiring banks to renegotiate those mortgages so that people don't wind up losing their homes to start with, and to make sure that we have programs to prevent homelessness, and that we also have affordable housing.
Yes.
We've lost all those programs. We've lost public housing.
That's
We
why I
need to
asked you
bring
that
that back.
That's why I asked you that question.
Good question. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for asking, and
Thank
thank you for
Thank
being here.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
How do we turn off the pipeline,
Yeah.
like as Cuba has led the way? How do we do that here?
Great question. In many ways, the pipeline is turning itself off, and we keep putting artificial supports back under it. It's both economically that the pipeline is turning itself off because fossil fuel is becoming very expensive. It's extremely unstable. We're looking at, strikes in Nigeria now. We could look at pipelines all over the place that can go down like that, and we do not have, the margin to cover fluctuations in the pipeline. And the oil supply is going down. You can argue whether it's 50 years or 100 years or 5 years, but the pipeline is getting, what we have found over and over again is that when people really have choices, they will move to what is healthy and sustainable. In Massachusetts, we ran a referendum all over the place, and not just in the tree-hugging, liberal, progressive communities, but in the really burned out and abandoned, impoverished communities too, asking people, do they want to see us move the money from supporting big multinational corporations? In Massachusetts, it's $1 billion a year. In the whole U.S., there are many, many billions of dollars in subsidies every year that we're providing for oil, for nuclear, which would go away overnight if the U.S. government wasn't subsidizing it.